When Alexandria recently returned to my life, it triggered a sudden flood of vivid, prophetic dreams that I couldn't ignore. To understand why these images were surfacing now, I decided to revisit my old audio diaries and journals, searching for the roots of a spiritual struggle that felt far from over. Listening to those tapes creates a strange dialogue. I'm hearing the confused, hurting voice of my past self, while the person I am today attempts to decode the patterns she couldn't see. Digging into these raw memories is the only way to expose the spiritual warfare that was operating in the background of my life for years. By early 2020, my body was in a state of constant collapse. I recorded an indescribable fibromyalgia-type pain that made it nearly impossible to get out of bed. I believed the pain was a direct result of the rejection and abandonment I felt every time Rich chose drugs over our life together. But the core of the issue was a specific promise I made in October 2019. I wrote that I would be with him no matter what. At the time, I saw that phrase as a sign of love and loyalty. Today, I recognize it as a binding spiritual contract. An ungodly soul tie is a legal document in the spiritual realm that bypasses natural boundaries. By maintaining that vow no matter what, I kept the door open for the entities attached to him to flow directly into my reality. That promise essentially removed my spiritual defenses. Without those boundaries, the trauma and negative entities I was tethered to began to manifest as the literal, excruciating physical pain documented in my journals. My solution back then was to dive deeper into energy work. I tried to maintain a high vibration, believing that if I could process the lower energies of humanity, I would find my own healing. In May 2020, I spent hours in the shower calling on Archangel Michael to cut emotional cords to my past, hoping these spirit guides could provide the release I needed. I was unknowingly practicing a form of angel worship, convinced that enduring the trauma of others was a noble spiritual duty rather than a trap. I realized later that the entities I was reaching out to were counterfeits, figures that encouraged me to manage my symptoms rather than address the root of the bondage. The peace I sometimes felt in those moments came from the Holy Spirit, who was honoring the heart behind the prayer, even while I was calling on the wrong names. It's a subtle tactic. The kingdom of darkness uses these spiritual substitutes to keep a victim preoccupied with vibrations and guides, preventing them from ever seeking true, permanent deliverance through Jesus. My subconscious eventually began to expose these deceptions through dreams. I dreamt of an old farmhouse in Oklahoma where I discovered dressers filled with my own forgotten clothes. Those items represented lost pieces of my identity and trauma that I had tucked away, revealing that my past wasn't actually resolved, it was just stored. A second dream followed, involving a spam caller sending explicit videos to my phone. In the dream, the only way to block the intrusion was to dial the code ZZD. When I woke up and searched that code, it led me to the Wicked Bible, a 17th century printing famous for a clerical error that omitted the word not from the commandment against adultery. The dream provided a clear example of how these spiritual forces operate. By removing a single word, they pervert the truth and attempt to bypass our boundaries to corrupt the soul. By August 2024, my discernment had shifted. I had a dream where a man named Jerry was about to pay $700 for a witchcraft altar, believing he had to do it to show love for his girlfriend. In the dream, I saw the entity stalking him, a false Jesus and the three-headed goddess Hecati. Instead of remaining a bystander, I intervened. I warned Jerry that paying for that altar would align him with a darkness far worse than what he was already facing, and he chose to walk away. This wasn't the woman from the 2020 journals who was crushed by the weight of someone else's choices. This was a person operating with active, protective spiritual authority. That authority had to be applied to my own life. This past August, I sent a final, unapologetic message to Rich. I refused to continue being a crutch good. In prayer, I renounced every vow and promise I made in 2019, finally breaking the contract that allowed his trauma to manifest as my pain. I chose to delete my social media as well, not out of anger, but to close every possible spiritual open door to that negative realm of existence. My journey shows that healing isn't found by absorbing the world's pain, but by identifying the legalistic traps we've walked into, renouncing them, and standing firm in the power of the Holy Spirit.